Well, Jason, thanks so much for the invitation to speak to your group today. My name is Mitch Bagley. I've been leading our marketing communications for the better part of 2 years at Insurance Collaboration to Save Lives. I joined the board last year, and this is my full-time job. But my colleagues, Steve Saborn and Rebecca Ritchie, and the remainder of our group are a bunch of insurance leaders who come together really around a more proactive health approach that we believe the industry can take. And our group formed in about 2022. It was very data intensive volunteers, actuaries, analysts, some life insurance medical doctors, really looking at mortality and morbidity trends during the peak pandemic time period. And I would say our group really took off in 2023, about the same time that Rebecca and Steve and I all joined. And our group really went from looking at what the numbers were for mortality and morbidity to what can we go do about the numbers. And really taking, a lot of our group, we have leaders from across all sections of the insurance industry, but I would say a lot of our group comes from the property and casualty side of insurance, where we're looking at our numbers on a quarterly to yearly basis, assessing loss ratios and implementing risk management practices in a short amount of time. And we thought, on a relatively simple level, if we could take that same type of mindset to some of the life insurance mortality trends that we are seeing and bring a more proactive risk management mindset to that, ultimately it's going to save insurers on some of the losses and financials that they're seeing during that time period. But it's also going to create healthier communities and help reverse some of the health trends that we were seeing. And so our group consists of, I would say, three different groups. We have a research and analytics team looking at the latest trends with CDC data. We have a group looking at German hospitalization data as well. So we have that group looking at the latest trends. Our medical advisory group consists of about 5 or 6 different MDs, both in life insurance and then from other sections of medicine as well. And then we have our marketing and agent advisory group. We're really excited to talk to this group here today. We think agents can have a really big impact on curbing some of these health trends that Steve and Rebecca will touch on, because you all are talking to policyholders on a day-to-day basis, and we really think our proactive approach and some of the health testing and screenings that we'll talk about today can have a major impact in reversing some of these health trends. So I want to introduce Steve and Rebecca, and we can dive in to some of the trends and analysis that our group has looked at, and we definitely want to keep this as an open dialogue and not just us presenting. So any questions that you have as we're going through these trends, please let us know, and happy to create an open dialogue about this. So Steve, you want to take it from here?
Sure. I'm Steve Saborn, and I'm an actuary. I've been working at some of the big consulting firms at Mercer, at Siegel, at Willis Towers Watson, on their national teams for health management as well as leave absence and disability at each firm, and led both of those when I was at Siegel. And I had started noticing these trends and saw what Josh was doing with ICSL, and wanted to see what I could do to take some of my background to help address some of the drivers of the increased mortality and disability.
And I am Rebecca Ritchie. I'm a PNC agent from the DC area. Like Mitch said, I joined in early 2023, the ICSL team. Been working with their marketing and solution development teams in order to expand our networks and carve out new pathways forward that will serve to reclaim that lost resiliency that the public is grappling with post-COVID.
And I would just add over, like I mentioned in my opening, most of our marketing and our industry conversations have been with life and disability. We're also been talking to some higher casualty lines, trucking, aviation, who definitely has interest in keeping their policyholders healthy. But long-term care insurance, it hasn't necessarily been a focus of ours, but these trends and some of the proactive measures that we'll talk about is definitely applicable to long-term care right now, and then heading into the future as well. Steve, maybe you want to bring up if you have the PowerPoint in front of you, some of the major mortality trends that our research team has been taking a look at.
Sure. Let me figure out how to share real quickly.
Green button at the bottom of your screen.
There we go.
There you go.
All right. So a few things that we did. We've been looking at a lot of different things from the German health data. We're looking at CDC mortality data and also disability data. And this is something we've been checking on a quarterly basis of looking what's going on with German health data. And one of the interesting findings that we found in the German health data is this rapid increase in hospital cases related to tricuspid heart valve diagnoses. And you can see how it's tripled in terms of the number of cases that they're seeing with regards to tricuspid valves. And heart is one of those big areas that we've been seeing. Whoops. And so that's something that we've been looking at. Looking also at the life expectancy, what we saw was a big drop in life expectancy in 2020, but then 2021 even further. And we've been slowly creeping back up. We're almost to where we would have expected. Now, but if you look at historical pandemics, you would see a spike in mortality or a dip in life expectancy for no more than 18 months. And then you'd see a valley or an increase in mortality, because really what you're doing is pulling mortality forward. But we're not seeing that in this case. Here we're 5 years out and there's been no valley in mortality. And we still haven't gotten to where we were pre-pandemic in terms of the mortality. Looking at disability data, what we're seeing is it's been a big increase. I think we're up like 25, depending on what group you're looking at, we're up 25, 30%. And I think female mortality, which we might get to in another slide or two, is up the most. This is looking at, this is up 39%. Women, the percent of women with disability is up 39%. And so employed men is up 24%. These are the categories of the mortality that we've been seeing. Increases in cardiac of 8 to 36%, neurological and nervous system is up 16 to 39%. And there's certain categories, it's not all conditions, but we're finding trends of certain conditions within these categories that are elevated. Metabolic and digestive is up 10 to 137%, and cancer is up 10 to 50%. And other external causes is up 11 to 30%. So these are all areas that we've been focusing on with our efforts to try to save lives. Is how do we identify people with these conditions, and then what can we do to manage or mitigate those conditions? Do you want me to go into another level of detail, Mitch, or should we open it up for questions, or what would you like?
Yeah, I think any questions at this point would be great. Probably a good stopping point if anybody has any questions at this point.
We'd like this to be conversational. So if you have any questions, you want to put it in the chat, or just open your line and ask us questions.
Yeah, I've got it out in the chat that people can feel free to drop any questions that they have. I'll make sure they definitely get answered. I'll be your guys' eyes in the chat and kind of ask on your behalf. But I think if we don't have any right now, I would feel free to just go into another level of detail. I'd love to kind of see the layers peeled back on what you're seeing in each of these categories. And
sounds good. So we looked at for each of these categories, we looked at the underlying cause of death, which is really what's identified as the primary diagnosis behind the cause of death. And then we also looked at all causes of death, so all the diagnoses. And this is looking at the primary cause or the underlying cause of death. And you can see certain conditions within cardiac and circulatory are up a lot. And hypertensive is right at the top of the list. We also received from one of our solution providers that we're looking to help them customize their solution to address this, provided a lot of data, like lab data on their book of business from 2018 to current. And we were able to see of all the markers, the biggest marker that moved the most was their hypertensives. They were up the most and the most significant, statistically significantly.
Yeah, and a lot of what I'm hearing out there is that 25 to 54-year-old age range is seeing, the onset of, morbidity and mortality a lot heavier with certain conditions compared to some of the other age groups. I'd be interested to know what you're seeing, what you're finding there that's kind of leading to that.
Yeah, that's for sure. What we did see is in 2023, the older ages had gone back to normal mortality rates, whereas we were still up in the 15 to 45 age range. Mortality was still up 15% in 2023. I'm still waiting to get 2024 data to see, but I'm suspecting that we're still going to see some increase in mortality, even though the period life expectancy is getting pretty close to normal. There's still going to be some pockets that are probably still pretty well elevated, and an issue for us that we still need to address. So great observation. And yes, you're right. You can see how pretty much all of these are higher than the 65 plus, and this should be the healthier group. But we're seeing.
So I guess for our audience, we have an audience of largely long-term care specialists, but the life insurance story is definitely not lost on us either, because we work with a lot of hybrid life long-term care plans. And I think the group would be interested to know what you're seeing on the insurer's side. What kind of changes have they had to make? Are they becoming more conservative on their underwriting in certain areas that you've noticed or that you've recommended, kind of based on what you're seeing, what you're studying?
Well, I'll address one of the things that I've seen from my own client book of business. I worked with some large employers. Two of the clients that I work with, one has 160,000 employees, another has about 100,000 employees. And the 160,000 employer group, they've seen their claim payouts 135% over the level premium if it were at the 2020 levels. And they really didn't have any losses in that 2020 year, but they're continuing to see losses in their population. The other side, the 100,000 life employer, who's actually in the transportation industry, they are seeing, they've had their premiums increase about 35%, and they're also seeing that's about what the experience is justifying for them. So it seems to be an ongoing issue for employers, and the insurers are trying to adjust their rates. That first 160,000 employee group, they have their own captive. So that was just losses in their captive, and they're having to adjust their rates now to catch up to what their mortality has been doing. But it's pretty significant losses for them. And it's something that I think if these very large employers are seeing these trends, we could probably be sure that these insurers are seeing similar issues. They don't necessarily all show, because some of them are using investments to offset some of the losses that they're seeing on the side, and they're all pretty well capitalized. So that's something they can do. Some of them are saying that they're not seeing as much like on individual policy books, because they do a pretty heavy underwriting, and they've avoided some of these issues. And some of them are just starting to see cancers rise, and because cancers have been a little more delayed impact, and they're starting to see the hit from cancers just now.
Yeah, it's certainly not at the level that brought a lot of our group together in the that 21, 22 time period. Mortality is, from an insurer's perspective, as best I can tell, is definitely normalized, but there's still, to Steve's point, still seeing some of it in certain books of business. In particular, last couple of quarters, employer stop loss has been an issue in the industry. So there are a lot of these health concerns that we're seeing. This is CDC mortality is definitely showing up within the industry.
One other thing that I'll point out, that when we talk to these insurers, one of the things that they've done that has been a strategy of theirs for quite some time is that they've used some hedging of their risk by trying to balance their portfolio between annuity business and the life death benefit business. And that, when somebody dies early on annuity business, that's a gain. And that's helped offset a lot of their risk that they had on the life insurance side. And this very large employer that I was talking about with 160,000 employees, they don't have an annuity to offset that. So that's just was a hard hit for them. And I think they had losses of like 35, 60 million, something like that, on those captives. So that's a lot of money to absorb for an organization, on top of all of their other benefit costs. So working through this is a look at the same information, but looking at all the multiple causes. So if, let's say, I die of a car accident, but it's because I had a heart attack, it would show up in here, plus the external causes. And no matter whether it's the first, second, or third diagnosis, it would show up on here. And you could see a similar story, but there's actually a few more conditions that are showing up red here as compared to when we were looking at it on this first slide. Nervous and neurological is an interesting one, because I know a lot of people have different mental health issues, and there a lot of people are blaming it on mental, just deteriorating of mental health because of stress, et cetera. But our clinicians, the doctors that are part of our group, say that there's something that's happened physiologically that's impacting people's mental health as well. There is the whole neurotransmitter system is being disrupted by the spike protein, and that is probably contributing to some of the issues that we're seeing from a mental health perspective. In addition, there's been quite a bit of study done around these amyloid fibrin microclots that's been spiking for a large percentage of the population. These are the same things that are found in the brains of people with Alzheimer's disease, and they're finding these same microclots throughout the bodies of people that are dealing with the spike protein.
Yeah, that's probably one of the most interesting topics to us as long-term care specialists. I mean, especially long-term care insurers. I mean, you're talking about the most devastating claim an insurer can come up against is an Alzheimer's or dementia claim.
Absolutely, it is big, and this is actually, I think, going to peak, I think, research and development around this in a different way than maybe they'd looked at it in the past, because they've developed protocols now to mitigate that amyloid fibrin microclots in people with COVID that may have a positive impact even for Alzheimer's patients. So I think this is something that I think, if you're looking at your book of business and you want to minimize the claims for people, or people's concern about amyloid about getting Alzheimer's, some of the mitigation strategies that we're developing into our protocols could be of great benefit for your customers that may be buying long-term care because of a family history of Alzheimer's, et cetera. So this is looking at the underlying cause, and this is looking at the multiple cause, both of which are pretty high. Metabolic and digestive is another one. You can see some pretty high ones here. I'm not going to get into too much detail on these. I do want to get, and cancers is another one that's up. What's interesting is if you look at cancers overall, you don't see huge increases in mortality due to cancers. And part of that is because lung and colon are such big ones, and breast are such big ones, and they have actually been down. But if you look at a lot of these other cancers, there's really significant increases. And we believe that it's probably related to spike protein. And actually there's quite a bit of research coming out indicating how that spike protein is impacting this, and protocols being developed to smoke out the spike protein and mitigate the inflammation and disruption that it's doing to your system, so that you could prevent cancers as well. This is all cause. These are external causes. I want to get to one slide here. So this is a protocol that we're developing, that we've developed, and we think it's a great protocol to have in place from an insurer. But I think as advisors for long-term care, if you're also advising with your customers around other financial issues, and you meet with them annually, develop a financial plan, incorporating this type of a protocol, a screen test triage, could also give you another reason to talk to them about their overall health plan, to see how are you progressing financially, and your ability to then enjoy reap the rewards of your labor during your working years, even in your retirement, by properly managing your health plan as well. And this could give you a good look with them around what's going on with them physically. And I'm going to get to this. So looking at those conditions that we identified, we ran a pilot for the volunteers, and we had 30 or so of our volunteers participate in this, and we had some interesting findings. One interesting finding was everyone was asked what they thought, how they felt their health was, and 60% of the people participating said, "Oh, I have no known health issues," and they thought they were pretty healthy. Interestingly, I think it was 92% though, had one of the serious health conditions that we identified. So a lot of people had unknown health issues that they were facing. But these were some of the big findings that we had. This first one, I think, we had several markers for health or cardiac risk. 14% had 3 or more of the markers that we had for cardiac. And so these people have pretty serious health issues that need to get addressed. And they need to probably see a cardiologist pretty quickly to address those issues. And several people each of those people had no idea, and they were able to get help and mitigate those risks. These next two, I think, are what I found most fascinating. This first one is high homocysteine levels. 28%, or almost 1 in 3, had high homocysteine, and this is a marker for heart attack risk. And what I find interesting about this one is the treatment is really simple. You just need to increase your folate, your B6 and B12 your B6 and B12 intake to help mitigate and bring down the homocysteine levels. There are other genetic factors like the MTHFR. There is a gene mutation for MTHFR that actually a pretty good portion of the population has. And if you have that, folic acid is actually toxic to your body and also increases risk of mental health issues. So it's a little more complex than just taking the B6 and B12. You need to be careful about what type you're taking, what type of B6 and 12 you're taking. The next one is for immune risk, but so much more than just immune risk. Vitamin D was deficient in 24% and 69% were below optimal. And when we looked at the research around vitamin D in particular, going from normal to optimal reduces your risk of all-cause mortality by about 15%. And to go from, if you go from normal to deficient, like this 24%, your increased risk of mortality is up like over 50%. So getting not only to the normal range, but to the optimal is a pretty big deal. And these are very low cost things. So if you were meeting with your customers and they measured high for either of those two, you could get them help pretty quickly by just getting them to take vitamins regularly.
Yeah, and Steve, we had a good question come into the chat.
Sure.
You know, these screenings are definitely valuable tools. But Diane is saying, how do we encourage people to get LTC insurance prior to getting these screenings done? Because if they are, undergoing a screening, many times if that screening yields results of you have this marker for this specific illness that carriers don't like, that could preclude their ability to get coverage altogether. I think that's a really important issue that we've seen is even people taking 23andMe tests, could come back with some sort of assessment that, you've got this marker, now you're completely precluded from long-term care insurance. And I'm sure it happens in other lines as well. What do you guys have to recommend there?
Well, I'd recommend saying, look, I'd love to put you through this testing. You might want to get insurance first in case it surfaces something. But I mean, I'm not the master long-term care salesman, but that is something that I think would be good to look at. But I think this is precluding the issues surfacing since COVID. I think has resulted in increased denials of insurance for all forms of insurance, and I'd rather get them addressed and have if you get them through the testing, you test them, mitigate it, and then have them apply. Because if they don't understand this risk and it's found out in the underwriting process, they're going to get denied as well. So if you could get it addressed before they go through the underwriting process and have it mitigated, I think that's probably the best solution. And even if you have this at one point in your time, if you're tested during the underwriting process and you don't have that risk now, I don't think it'll be as big of an issue. Everyone has health issues throughout their life. It's what are you doing to manage or mitigate those?
Yeah, and I think it's also, down to just having the conversation around these issues and what the trends are that we're seeing out there and understanding that this testing is available, but just being able to understand the landscape is going to provide at least some sense of urgency to get yourself protected, get yourself screened at the end of the day. So we've got a couple other chats here. Chris is asking, so only 7% have sufficient vitamin D intake at this point from what you're seeing?
Well, no, this 69% includes the 24%.
Okay.
So they were only 31%, which is still pretty bad.
Yeah, agreed.
And now this also varies a lot by geography, because certain times a year, if you're up on the northern portion of the United States, even if you're outside all day, you won't get enough vitamin D on your own. You're going to have to supplement. And our clinician, Kate Hendricks, did a whole webinar on this. If you wanted to go to our website or on our social media where we posted it, you could watch all about it. But she says, and she worked with the CDC around this matter. And one of the things that she says is if your shadow is longer than your body, then you're not getting sufficient sunlight to absorb any vitamin D. And there's all kinds of maps you could look at for where you are and how long you need to be outside to get sufficient vitamin D. But the majority of the population is not getting optimal vitamin D. And even when you look at it, like for bone density, they say you only need 30, but for immune health, you really need it to be above 60, somewhere to 60 to 100. But this is so critical for mitigating cancer risk and so many other conditions that this is probably the number one recommendation that we have, is to make sure you're getting adequate vitamin D. And even if you're taking a supplement, if you're not getting adequate vitamin K, you're not absorbing it and using it properly. So,
and vitamin D, it through different medical opinions, you'll hear that getting it through sunshine is better than supplements. But I would say a valid critique that we've received throughout our journey is that, it's one thing to have a test, but how do you change behavior to ultimately create healthier policyholders and future clients? And vitamin D, the supplementation is a very easy way to increase your overall metabolic and immune health. It's a very easy and addressable condition versus some of the others aren't quite as easy as taking a supplement.
Yeah, that's kind of what Raymond was speaking to in the chat, given a lot of the obesity data and given that we're still living long lives, but we are, arguably not spending that extra time healthier or, still kind of dealing with that obesity front there. You kind of got to start with little steps, right? I mean, supplementation, I agree with you, is probably one of the easiest things you can suggest outside of an entire lifestyle change. And Raymond also asked, will health screening be covered by health insurance or is it a fee paid personally? What are the fees? Where do people go to get these kinds of health screenings?
So, interestingly, you can get, if you go to your primary care, you may be able to get them to prescribe these screenings and have it covered by insurance. Certain of these screenings may or may not be covered by insurance, though, depending on your policy and whether or not they are considered medically necessary. We do have these screenings available in 49 of the 50, 30, 47 of the 50 states via our website using Ulta Labs. You can go out there and they'll facilitate it through, is it Quest Labs?
Quest Diagnostics, yes.
Quest Diagnostics. So you can get your screening for the panel that we've developed, and we developed it based on our pilot and research to really help identify 85% of the risks that would be driving the increased mortality. And so there is a cost to that. You may or may not be able to submit it for insurance. And some of them, though, if you were going through your insurance, may require some degree of medical necessity. Although I personally think they should all be covered under preventive, which is required by law to be covered at 100%. It just depends on how the policy rules set up by your health insurance.
Yeah, I guess, Raymond's question and just what we're going over here has me wondering, like, what of these items that you're finding are items that are not screened for in kind of your basic metabolic profile at your doctor or routine blood work?
Quite a few of these are not going to be in your basic screening. We had to go and search for screenings that were addressing the specific issues that are driving increased mortality. We did include in our on our pilot panel all of the basic screenings that you would have in your basic panel, but we had to reach out to get some that are not, in order to identify the risks that are driving increased mortality. We went well beyond what your basic panel would include.
Gotcha.
And so just to, we have three different panels on our, or three panels in total on our website. One is strictly for cardiac biomarkers. That was on the left side of that screen, looking at hsCRP, D dimer,
Okay.
troponin, and T-proBNP. Our thought is to, have insurers, incentivized to do this. They have to be at a reasonable cost. And so you can obtain these tests on the left for about $150, $160. Typically, it would run more so 300 to 350. We do have a comprehensive panel that includes some cardiac markers, and then includes vitamin D and a cancer screening CEA, A1C as well. That runs at about $175, and then you can the totality of all the tests in one panel for about $200. That would normally be in the more towards $400 $400 zone. And so with our partnership with Alta Labs, to have that discount, we think is a very very good incentive for people to go get a checkup and see some of these markers.
Yeah, and we're making this available. A lot of times they're marked up for the physician or someone, they're recommending it to make some fees off it, or if a vendor, they put their markup on for administering it. We've given the wholesale price to anyone because this is all volunteer, not for profit, and we want to make sure that people are getting tested and identifying their risks and mitigating that risk.
Some of the implications of these tests is not just a call for your clients to go out and get this screening, it's to broaden that conversation in that long-term care space, that through different types of wraparound solutions, these tests are showing that people are struggling more with chronic disease. They are struggling in these certain ways. And how can we, beyond income protection, how can we add in some of these wraparound solutions that provide solutions for the in the now that people are struggling with, along with the short term, in order to avoid that long-term cost, or at least prolong it as far as possible. And so that conversation can really be turned to, these are the trends that we're seeing. Is there a good way of delivering healthcare management that we can provide in some of these hybrid products that will help you with chronic care management? It will help you, with reduced readmissions and post-discharge challenges and things like this. Some of our deck does go to show how, not only screening, but there are ways in which we can mitigate what we're seeing prior to encouraging anybody to screen at all. Let's start to manage the care that we're seeing now, again, as some type of wraparound solution in order to help scale like the workforce efficiency and the supply problems that everybody's dealing with.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Definitely interested to hear any, outside of screening, just certain practicalities that you're seeing that can really help people as kind of a pre-step to any screening process. And it looks like Raymond has another pretty good question. Are our primary care physicians knowledgeable enough to know about these health screenings and to know where to order them from, things of that nature? Are you finding anything on that, or do you have anything to share on that front?
I don't know of general knowledge around this. We are working with a couple of virtual primary care solutions that are working to build these into their offerings, and we're trying to get them made. Right now, they're either subscription or made only available to employers, like through employer offerings, and we're trying to get those made available through our online marketplace, or whatever we're going to ultimately call it, where we're making some of these custom solutions addressing these issues. We'd like to make them available to the general public at large. But we're trying to build it in at least so it's available, so insurers or collectives could make this offering available. It's a little harder for primary care physicians who are dealing with the really treatment protocols that they provide to their patients. They are not. I have not seen a widespread a focus on them or their understanding of these issues. There's actually been more resistance to what the data is showing than proactive interest in addressing these issues.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I would, yeah, go ahead, Mitch. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna add, yeah, if in the case that your primary care doctor is doesn't want to order these tests or doesn't think they're beneficial, that's where using our link on our website, it's a very timely process to where you go into your local Quest Diagnostics if you're not, that is if you're not in New Jersey, New York or Rhode Island, and go to your local Quest and sign up for these tests, and they send you your results back in about 2 to 3 days directly to you without any back and forth between your current doctor, if that is an issue.
I have a question,
Sure.
if I may. Are you seeing any indication that genetics plays a factor in like COVID and long COVID and these things that are impacting health outcomes? Because I have a 92-year-old mother, so
Yes.
I'm thinking of her as you're going through all of this.
I would say there is definitely a genetic aspect. I mentioned earlier the MTHFR gene mutation that will make the impact on your mental health and even cardiac health worse if you have that, and your ability to even process the folic acid to address homocysteine levels.
Right.
But we've also been talking to an epigenetics company who are looking at so the genes is what is your hereditary traits that may drive an issue, and your epigenetics kind of wrap around your genes, and they determine whether a certain gene is expressed or not. And through this process, what we've learned is our epigenetics have also been changed, which may have allowed certain genes to be expressed that hadn't been expressed in the past. And what we're looking to do with this epigenetics company is to run some pilots with some of these insurers to look at different interventions and see which interventions will help prevent some of these genes from being expressed or mitigate some of the expression of these genes. So yes, we are finding that the genetics do have a play, and we're looking at, what can be done about that, both the genetics and the epigenetics.
Yeah, so I guess for everybody on the call today, I would love to hear from you guys, Mitch, Steve, or Rebecca. What are our kind of simple, practical takeaways from the data we're seeing? How can we use this to, really kind of inspire our clients to get to know their own health a little bit better? Or any just practicalities that you think will help the agent population?
Rebecca, do you want to talk a little bit about what we're doing from the RFI process and some of the things specifically that you find for long-term care?
Yes, absolutely. So the ICSL started an RFI process where we went to search the marketplace to see what are solution providers doing post-COVID to address some of these new challenges that weren't as apparent pre-2020. And in that, we're learning that engagement is a tremendous challenge. especially with the trust deficit and other things that have taken place since COVID was presented to us. And so as I said in my introduction, we're trying to expand this network in order to create these pathways that can address some of these challenges. And engagement is the number one way in which we're doing that. And to scale back a little bit, some of the implications of what you all are hearing on that long-term care space is it's simply exacerbating, an already bloated supply problem. And to solve this, we're learning about there are these wraparound programs where, you add to that product certain things like a chronic care management, respite support for caregivers, post-discharge programs, things like this that can show your client that we're going to take care of you in the now. If you're a caregiver, we're going to take care of you in the short term. If you're struggling with chronic disease, which most likely you are, in order to prevent that eventual long-term care claim, which we will also provide care for. And so as we've been working with some of these solution companies, we're learning, certain programs that are addressing like engagement was our first key challenge that we recognize to be a part of that post-COVID landscape. How do you engage people where they are? They've just been through a ride like have never been experienced before. And how do you grab them and how do you help coach them in order that, if they're not going to get screenings, well, how can we make sure that troponin levels stay good and we're preventing cardiovascular problems, we're managing any type of metabolic problems that they're struggling with? How do you do that? And some of the strategies that we're learning really has a lot to do with behavior, the behavioral economics of a person, and the principles of there's neurological principles of an individual. And when you combine these things and integrate them into some type of engagement strategy, you see high engagement levels and you see tremendous impact in these goals that different institutions have set for some of their populations. I know Mitch can speak to our newest founding partner, who is all over that engagement space of how do we steer people in these best ways. I just lost my screen here.
Well, why don't you talk a little bit about the overlap between what the top drivers of long-term care diagnoses are and the conditions that we're seeing causing increased mortality, and how we're addressing a lot of these top drivers automatically with the work that we're doing.
Right. So Alzheimer's disease takes the cake. They're number one at 25% of the long-term care diagnosis. Those neurological problems are well exceeding expectations in the young. As Steve mentioned earlier, long-term spike presence in a body that, is stubborn to clear. It crosses blood-brain barriers, and it is causing a lot of neurological trouble. And so that percentage will probably grow. This is from the American Association of Long-Term Care Insurance back from 2011, and we do expect that number to probably look a little more scary as new rates come out. Stroke is next at 9%. Again, the young and working seem to be succumbing to some of these cardiovascular events well before expected. Arthritis is another one where, again, long-term impact of the SARS-CoV-2 spike can directly contribute to hypoxia, right? Which is a lack of oxygen going to some of these critical organs, and arthritis and other musculoskeletal issues are starting to really show themselves as being suffering from some of this. Jumping down to circulatory problems, again at 9%, the vascular nature of long COVID and persistent spike protein post-exposure is causing a lot of problems down the line. Cancer is another one. Strange cancers are really popping up in, again, the young and the healthy, where we're finding that conventional therapies are not working like they used to. And there's a need to explore some of the alternative routes to treatment synergistically with those conventional therapies. Jumping down to nervous system issues that at 6%, again, the epigenetic impact of the SARS-CoV-2 spike on the body is upending a lot of the mechanisms of our cells, and is showing that without any type of mitigation measures, these percentages are likely to increase. And then respiratory issues down at the bottom at 5%. These are the top that we found to be those the top long-term care diagnoses.
And all of these are what we're seeing as elevated since COVID too. So that we think that there's probably a direct relation to all these, and we could probably see increases in long-term care claims as these continue to grow.
Yes.
Yeah, I would just add at the highest level for on the long-term care agent side of things, just the overall providing clients and future sales prospects with just an awareness of these rising conditions and what's going on from a health perspective can ultimately help you. We strongly believe can help you sell more policies. And the looking back at the workforce data that Steve had presented from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, this problem isn't going away. We'd like to think, thankfully, a lot of the mortality that we've seen has gone down, but the fact that it's still near record levels on the disability, we think a large awareness for your current clients and future policyholders can ultimately help you sell more down the line as well.
The one thing that I'll add on to this data is I have a national retail restaurateur, and I do their disability work. And looking at their data since COVID, they've had for these, I overlap these same conditions on their disability data, and those conditions that we've identified that are causing increased mortality, their disabilities were up 100% for those conditions. Their musculoskeletal was up 50%, and the rest were down 15%. So it doesn't look like overall it's going up as much. But when you look at these specific conditions that are driving increased mortality, it is having a big impact on their disabilities since COVID. And so it's a marked impact on them.
And again, it's only exacerbating an already bloated supply problem. And as you're having conversations with prospects about the need for long-term care insurance, again, to expand that conversation beyond just income protection and show them that, through certain carriers, wraparound solutions are available that can address that need in the now. If they're a caregiver, unexpectedly, they can address the short-term need to manage some of these conditions in order that you can preserve that policy as long as possible before tapping into it. That is, that education piece seems to resonate with a lot of people, because as you're selling these products, people want to know that, what can you do now to help the situation as it is, and what's out there and what's available.
And it certainly heightens the need for long-term care insurance. If these conditions are going to be increasing, a simple education around what's happened since COVID may heighten someone's awareness of their need for it. Because these conditions are increasing most in the younger ages, whereas
that's really where I was going to go with it. Is I think one of the common misconceptions out there is I won't need long-term care until I'm 80. Well, a lot of the data that we're seeing here is showing us that not only are these long-term care conditions on the rise, so people just think of it as, getting older, degenerative sort of coverage, right? But understanding that beyond just kind of getting old, cancer is one of the leading long-term care claims, and all of the other conditions that you mentioned on the rise at earlier ages really can kind of help people understand why I would purchase this now instead of waiting till later beyond some of the obvious reasons we give as agents, is one of the big things that you can take away from this. And
Yeah. Somebody
you
that,
know,
oh, sorry.
just talking about the bloated supply issue of caregivers, definitely that's just another incentive, just helping folks to understand that you know, private dollars can help you go so much farther with the care that you can receive than, relying on Medicaid or, other government programs to pay for your long-term care as well. So, definitely see where you're coming from there too.
Yeah, and the implications for the younger ages, because it tells me that either I'm going to need care sooner than expected, or I will become a caregiver sooner than
Right.
expected. And
Yeah.
if some of these LTC products can help me through that journey before I turn that typical over 65 and will need it, that's a great selling point to know. It's like, oh, there's a program here that can help me with respite care. There's a program here to help coach me through chronic condition management and reduce my readmission should I find myself in the hospital. Those type of wraparound solutions will really help broaden that conversation, and get you more policies signed.
And anecdotally, somebody that I know, a friend of mine locally here, that I know through my church, I watched his health deteriorate, and following he's had multiple of these conditions, and he's now like completely disabled, and he's lost several of his activities of daily living, and I don't know if he is long-term care or not, but last last message he sent me, he stopped responding. I saw it. He said that he's virtually disabled now, and it's sad to watch him deteriorate, and he can't even respond to my messages anymore. So he's only a few years older than I am. So it's happening to people even at younger ages. They're getting impacted, and it's really sad.
Yeah, just whether it's data driven or anecdotally,
Yeah.
we absolutely know what's at stake and how important all our jobs are, and kind of trying to make sure that even if we do run into these situations, that people are as prepared for it as possible. And that really takes us to the top of the hour. So, do you guys have anything you want to leave everyone with as a quick 1 minute wrap up before we close it down today? I appreciate your time with us.
Yeah, no, Jason, thank you for the opportunity. And if anybody has any questions, again, please reach out to me directly, Mitch Bagley. Check out our website. We're really excited about the progress that we're making within the industry, and any help or questions that you have, we welcome. We really appreciate the opportunity for being here today.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you everybody for your questions and just being here with us. Next week we're going to have Kimberly Lips from John Hancock on the line to talk about their new life care product. So we hope you'll see us there, because this is a product we haven't had addressed on the study group yet. And everybody be safe, be well, and we'll talk to you this time next week. Have a good one. Mitch,
Thanks.
Steve, Rebecca, thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
Hi, everybody.
Bye
Bye bye.
bye.